Hey there, Deluxe fans! Hope you're feeling particularly magical today. In today's video, we are going to be discussing how Pixar's newest release, Turning Red, fits into the Pixar Theory. Many fans believe it's not possible given the difficulty in matching storylines to different movies in chronological order. However, if you stay till the end of the video, you'll hear our take on how Turning Red could be the perfect setup to another Pixar movie's story events. With the release of Turning Red, many Pixar fans found themselves curious as to how the movie might find itself fitting inside the Pixar Theory. Turning Red stuck with Pixar's classic technique of filling the film with cleverly hidden Easter eggs and direct references to both old and upcoming Pixar movies. Turning Red took place in 2002 and follows the life of Mei Lin Lee, better known as Mei. Mei was a Chinese Canadian who was horrified to learn that not only was she experiencing puberty, but also has the ability to transform herself into a massive red panda. Mei had to learn to deal with an overprotective mother who she was terrified of disappointing, while she tried to maintain her own life and independence. Now she was faced with something that can only be described as a generational curse, but it's something that Mei had to decide whether she would learn to live with or hide away like the rest of her ancestors. Turning Red took place in the early 2000s, which would place it somewhere between Toy Story 2 and Finding Nemo on the Pixar timeline. But many fans are curious as to how the movie would fit into the Pixar Theory if it's possible at all. But in order to go further with how it fits, we need to back up a little. What is the Pixar Theory? The Pixar Theory, in general, is the idea that all of Pixar's films actually take place in the same universe at different points in time. The theory was initially started by John Negroni and was backed up by a ton of proof through the use of various fan theories and Easter eggs that could be found in every single one of Pixar's movies. Since John started the theory, it has gained a massive amount of popularity, with many fans finding it not only interesting, but almost too good to not be true. The theory begins with Pixar's The Good Dinosaur, and starts off with the concept that dinosaurs, in that universe, believed to have potentially evolved to have developed near-human-like intelligence. As they evolved, they began to resemble giant birds very similar to Kevin in Pixar's Up. At some point in history, humans discovered these large birds and would come to find out that their eggs held magical attributes, and though the use of the dinosaurs managed to develop the magic that we saw in Pixar's Brave. The magic was then used on animals in the form of experiments, which ended up resulting in most animals around the world becoming highly intelligent. This is why the characters that we met in Finding Nemo and Ratatouille existed. However, magic was kept a secret from most people, which is why most people in the Pixar universe don't believe in it and don't concern themselves with the idea of talking animals. As time went on, magic became a dying concept and the world all but forgot about magical eggs from the large birds. This is when you start running into characters from movies like Up and The Incredibles. People like Charles Muntz, the explorer who was cast out of his community and deemed to be crazy for his obsession with this mysterious bird. You see, Muntz discovered that the eggs laid by these prehistoric birds had magic-like abilities that could do great things for humanity. Upon discovering this, the academic community shunned him in order to keep the discovery a secret, which then allowed the government to study the eggs and eventually develop superpowered humans like the Incredibles. With the Incredibles came Syndrome, the villain who would go on to create zero-point energy, and the AI tech that would eventually be used by the massive corporation By and Large. By and Large would use the tech to bring objects to life, whether they know about it or not, which is what resulted in the lovable toys that we all met in Toy Story. This was solidified when it was shown that Buzz's batteries are By and Large brand. The tech purchased by the mega corporation eventually led to a robot uprising within By and Large infrastructure that began polluting the Earth, heavily causing the humans to have to flee the Earth and head into space. This allowed the machines to rule over the Earth as they remained unaffected by the pollution, which explains why there aren't any humans found in the Cars movies. The Cars franchise took place while the humans were in space among the stars. However, as all time passed, all of the fossil fuels that the machines were running on began to run out, and the resource was eventually depleted, leaving Wall-E as the only working machine on the planet. Now, as we all saw in Wall-E, with the help of Eve, the two robots were able to bring humans back to Earth after discovering that it can be lived on once again. And based on that art found in the ending credit for Wall-E, many people believe that the plant that he found grew into that tree that is the home of the ants in A Bug's Life. As time passed further and further along, soon people started seeing animals that were mutated by the radiation that was left behind from By and Large. This would be the first sign of monsters, and before long, humanity would die out, leaving only monsters behind, which brings us to Monsters, Inc. We know that in order to power their world, the monsters require the screams of humans for their electricity. So in order to gather the screams from an extinct species, they created the doors. The theory explains that the doors used in Monsters, Inc. are actually powered by magic, which allows the monsters to travel to different time periods and gather all of the screams that they need. This is where Boo comes in to tie the entire Pixar theory together. It's believed that Boo became obsessed with seeing her good friend Sully again, and through this obsession, she somehow managed to harness the power of magic that powered the doors and allowed the monsters to travel through time. As Boo aged, many people believe we saw her again in the form of the old witch in Pixar's Brave during her travels through time. The Pixar theory also suggests that all of the Easter eggs found throughout Pixar's films were left in the universe specifically by Boo. Now, some fans of Pixar and their new film have spent time trying to figure out how Turning Red could possibly fit into the Pixar theory, and it seems like most of them have come to the same conclusion. While Turning Red might not have any strong indications that it's connected to other Pixar films, it also doesn't have any clue or indications that directly work against the theory. In fact, there are a few easy connections that can be made based on the setting and the plot of Turning Red. They just aren't obvious about it. The first thing that can easily connect Turning Red to the Pixar theory is the year in which the movie takes place. Turning Red is set in 2002, the year of boy bands and Tamagotchis, and being set in the early 2000s puts it in line to be taking place during or around the same time as the first two Toy Story movies, which, much like Turning Red, takes place on Earth with people living fairly normal lives. Now, we know that Buzz Lightyear, the character or the toy, must exist in some way in the Turning Red universe. As we pointed out in one of our previous videos, a few stickers can be seen on the bottom of Miriam's skateboard, one of which happens to be the Star Command logo. So while Andy was playing with the Buzz Lightyear action figure, Miriam was wrapping Buzz's squad on the bottom of her skateboard. The other connection that seems to be offering fans of Turning Red a lot of answers as to how it is connected to the Pixar theory is the fact that magic tends to play a major part in the Pixar universe. As we mentioned in the theory before, it's believed that at some point in the Pixar universe's history, humans somehow used dinosaurs to help them develop magic, which we then saw in the movie Brave. Well, since magic likely spread throughout the world, it would then show itself in different forms and through different people, which brings us to Mei and her ancestor, Sun Yi. Sun Yi used magic and her respect for nature and the red panda to protect her family and build a spiritual bond that was then passed on through the women in her family for generations. And over time, the women in the family would learn of a ritual that was able to connect their minds to the spirit world, where they would separate from their panda for good. This is where it's believed Turning Red could connect to Pixar's Soul. You see, in Soul, we saw that some people can perform a meditative ritual that allows them to pass into the spiritual world, better known as the Zone. Well, it would make sense to assume that this ritual was taught to them by someone, perhaps someone who happened to be involved with the ritual that Mei and her ancestors went through to pass into the spirit realm. Now, we aren't saying that one of Mei's aunts or grandmother taught Moonwind how to get into the Zone, but perhaps the ritual that Mei's family performs was some form of adaptation of that. This is why they have to sing a song that holds a close place in their heart. It puts them into the Zone. It would make sense to find out that whoever introduced Mei's ancestors to the Blood Moon ritual, that they were family with the spirit realm and how to get there, much like Moonwind was able to guide Joe and 22. Now, what if we told you that we think we found another way that Turning Red might not only connect, but add to the Pixar theory? We mentioned before how it's believed through the Pixar theory that animals had been affected by the radiation left behind by and Large, which caused them to mutate into the monsters that we saw in Monsters, Inc. We think that the story is actually a bit different than that, thanks to the new information given to us in Turning Red. We actually believe that monsters were there all along, way before By and Large had even opened its first animated doors. You see, in Turning Red, we learned that through magic, humans can be bound to spirits and other beings, which is something that is then passed down through generations. We think that, while Mei's ancestors happened to bind to the spirit of the red panda, other families may have found their souls bound to various kinds of spirits, the spirits of monsters. And much like Mei's family, many of them had learned a ritual that would rid of their bodies of the monster spirits. In other words, monsters always existed, but people got rid of them once they were able to, unlike Mei, who kept her alternate form. Now that being said, humans would still have been forced into space by and large, where they would then have to wait hundreds of years for Wall-E to inform them that the Earth is habitable once again, and save the humans from the axiom. What we believe to have happened is that upon returning to Earth from their centuries among the stars, humans realized that the only way that they would be able to survive is if they no longer hid their monsters away, and instead of getting rid of them, they would end up needing to embrace the monster that they were bound to. However, down the line, the people who decided to keep their monster and used it to survive would end up growing more and more attached to it before they could eventually no longer turn back into a human. This would end up creating a divide between monsters and those who remained human, and would eventually cause the two worlds to split up and send one to hide away in the shadows, which actually is supported by a Monsters Inc. DVD bonus feature that shows us how Monstropolis was founded and how monsters used to coexist with humans until they were all chased off of mainland, basically illustrating the divide that took place between monster and human. But getting back to the theory, in hiding, the monsters would then learn to build up a society of their own, which would eventually turn into the world surrounding Monsters Inc. And after that, the rest of the Pixar theory would pan out the way that we explained. Boo ended up becoming obsessed with finding her friends and developing a strong affinity for magic, which would then allow her to travel through time to account for her appearance as the witch in Brave, who helped to make animals intelligent and continuing the Pixar cycle all over again. Although it does change the Pixar theory a bit, we think that our theory fits in pretty well. But what about you? How do you think Turning Red connects to the Pixar shared universe theory? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. As for now, that's all Disney fans. Let us know what video you'd like to see next in the comments, and like and subscribe for more magically packed videos.